The 90s was quite literally the end of an era, the end of the 1900s, which of course started out kinda crazy, but by the end of this century, everything seemed to be a-okay. While the century started out in a time of war, it kinda ended in a time of peace. And I wanted to go over how that final year, 1999, was one of the best, and worst, years in modern history. Well, the anniversary of Retro Sick is coming up. I've made many videos, but none were quite like the first one I did that talked about how great 1998 was. While I was making that video, I realized that a lot of the greatness of 1998 spilled over into 1999. So if 98 was the best year of the 90s, 99 has to be a runner-up. So on the outside looking in, what was 1999? The numbers alone tell you everything you need to know going in. Within the realm of math, science, mythology, culture, and spirituality, it signifies a lot. But the number 9 overall is associated with completion and fulfillment, as it's the last single-digit number and represents the end of a cycle. So when it comes to the end of a century and the end of an era, there's really no better number than 1999. That's 3 nines. According to the Chinese zodiac, it was the year of the rabbit. And it's said that people who are born in the year of the rabbit exemplify calmness and peace. 1999, for the most part, was a time of peace. While there's always some conflict happening somewhere in the world, this was a time before the exhausting War on Terror and well after the Cold War. 1999 would exemplify a world being in a great place while overall anxiety was low. Gas prices in the US was well under $1.30 that entire year. Generally, gas was under $1 per gallon. And of course, gas prices reflected on everything else. This is what not being in an inflation looked like. Low prices reflected that finance-wise, 1999 was a period of smooth money flow. There was actually new money being made. The euro was introduced and became the official currency of a huge part of Europe. Italy, Ireland, Spain, Finland, France, Germany, and more would all be using the euro as of 1999. Now, while 99 was generally a great year of low anxiety, there were a few times that year where stress was at an all-time high. One was the Y2K scare. Basically, fear was created off the worry that computers might not be able to comprehend that it's not the 1900s anymore. What even was that? The Y2K scare was completely ridiculous. Like, why would a computer capable of basic math not be able to understand that 2000 comes after 1999? Society just loves drama, and I don't blame it. Humanity needs something to talk about. Early in the year was very stressful and gossipy, as the US President Bill Clinton was at the tail end of that whole situation with his intern, Monica. It led to Clinton being impeached in 98, but by early 99, he would be acquitted. Then you had a much more serious situation with the Columbine massacre that April. Happening in Colorado, it was a school massacre led by 2 teens that ended in 13 casualties. And at the time, it was the worst school shooting the world has ever seen at the time. But let's go into a more lighthearted 1999 event, the devastating tornado outbreak in Oklahoma. I was actually in Oklahoma when this happened. There was an F5 category tornado on May 3rd that pushed through Oklahoma City with some of the highest winds ever recorded. It ended the lives of around 40 people. You also had that terrible car pileup in Ontario that September because of the worst fog imaginable. But the good of the year definitely outweighs the bad. Apple introduced the Power Mac G4 as the successor to the iconic iMac G3 computers. The G4 boasted more power and was marketed as the first personal supercomputer. The first Legoland outside of Europe was opened in Carlsbad, California. Print publication-wise, Thomas Harris published Hannibal. the third book in his series that featured Dr. Hannibal Lecter that served as a sequel to The Silence of the Lambs. Years later, we would see the book Hannibal adapted in a movie, and in that breathtaking NBC drama. Another great horror series to start as a book in 1999 was Battle Royale by author Kushun Takami. It's a best-selling Japanese dystopian survival story that basically inspired The Hunger Games and Squid Game. In comics, The Boondocks, by writer and cartoonist Aaron McGruder, makes its debut in the LA Times as an ongoing comic strip. The Pokemon craze that had been sweeping through America since 1996 had apparently reached an all-time high with all the merchandise it already had, along with the hit TV show. Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow for the Game Boy were the best-selling home video games worldwide for the second year in a row, and with the Japanese release of Pokemon Gold and Silver later on that year, the rest of the world couldn't wait for the year 2000 to get here so they could get their hands on it. For video games, 99 was the beginning of the end for the whole N64 PlayStation 1 era. As the next generation of consoles were already being considered, the Dreamcast would be in the middle of its short-lived success. While the Dreamcast was coming out in North America and Europe, it got a huge win with Soul Calibur, a fighting game that would be named the year's most critically acclaimed video game, and the second best-selling game for the Dreamcast, behind Sonic Adventure. Speaking of popular fighters to come out in 1999, you had the very first Super Smash Bros. Game to come out for the N64. It's funny because Nintendo had no idea how successful this game was going to be when they made it. I mean, you got to fight Mario as Pikachu. Did they really not expect this to fly off the shelves? As popular as Pikachu was in 99, Pokemon Snap came out. It wasn't quite as exciting as Super Smash Bros., but the younger Pokemon fans loved it. The one other huge game that came out for the N64 this year was Donkey Kong 64. It was a massive achievement in just about everything Nintendo had done with Donkey Kong up to that point, and pushed the graphics capabilities of the hardware in a way no other game had before. The iconic skateboarding simulator, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, released for multiple consoles. PlayStation was killing it this year with the releases they had. There was Ape Escape, which was the first game to actually require the use of the DualShock controller. Naughty Dog's final Crash Bandicoot game, Crash Team Racing, released, as well as the sequel to Spyro the Dragon, Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, which was actually my first Spyro game. The 3D platformer era was still in full effect with all these sequels and spin-offs and original games coming out, and this probably led to Pac-Man World coming out this year as well. 3D Pac-Man was something you never thought you needed until 1999. Iconic horror games Resident Evil 3 and Silent Hill would come out as being two sides to the same coin, in a sense that Silent Hill was made to be so dark and foggy that you couldn't really see anything, while Resident Evil 3 was all mapped out in front of you, clearly visible. All these animated characters coming up in video games would be just a small part of the overall animation boom that was happening during this time. 1999 was a great year for animation. It seemed like all channels across TV had a popular cartoon. MTV had Beavis and Butthead and Daria. Comedy Central had South Park, and Fox now had Family Guy, which started airing in 99. Also, Futurama would air its first episode on the same network this year. Nickelodeon had great cartoons like Hey Arnold, even before debuting their most successful cartoon to this day, SpongeBob SquarePants. And even with SpongeBob now being in the picture, Cartoon Network was still the king of cartoons. They started airing Ed, Edd n Eddy this year. John Kay, the animator of Ren and Stimpy, came out with that Yogi Bear parody, Boo Boo Runs Wild. The popular show Dexter's Lab had a movie special called Ego Trip, and the iconic Courage the Cowardly Dog started airing that November. Fall of 99, PBS Kids came out with another modern classic, Dragon Tales. But their elder cartoon series, Arthur, had made a pretty big milestone itself. Arthur had this episode from season 4 that surprisingly parodied a lot of different animation styles, most notably South Park. This episode was pretty crazy. I believe it was made for one of Arthur's fans, and they had this contest of seeing, who came up with the best idea for an episode. And one apparently just wanted a mashup of all their favorite TV shows. They also parodied Dexter, MTV shows, and even WWF, something that South Park itself didn't get around to doing till the mid-2000s. So that Arthur episode was really a special moment in late 90s animation. Let's not forget about Kids WB and how they premiered Batman Beyond right at the beginning of the year. It served as a darker sequel to Batman the Animated Series and The New Adventures. Now, 1999 was a fantastic year for animated movies. Going back to South Park, the movie Bigger, Longer, and Uncut came out, and that South Park movie had no business being as good as it was. Late 90s to mid 2000s was actually peak South Park. It was low-key the funniest thing on TV. The cult classic, The Iron Giant, came out that year, by the way. And the much anticipated sequel to Toy Story 2, premiered in theaters, as well as Disney's Tarzan. It was the second highest grossing animated film of 1999, behind Toy Story 2. Between 1997 and 2002 was known in pro wrestling as the Attitude Era, and 1999 was right at the peak of that. The Attitude Era marked the rise of some of the most well-known wrestlers in the business, like The Rock, The Undertaker, and Triple H. What some would call the face of the Attitude Era was Stone Cold Steve Austin, and in 1999 he became the WWF champion with the help of Mick Foley. As The Rock rose in popularity, he declared himself the People's Champion and would eventually surpass Stone Cold Steve Austin, making himself the new face of the Attitude Era. The Rock in '99 would begin his transition into Hollywood. After being in an episode of That 70s Show, he'd play a wrestling alien on Star Trek Voyager. He wouldn't start films until 2001 with The Mummy Returns, but the first Mummy movie, arguably the best one, premiered in 1999. Another great year for the box office. The highest grossing film of that year, of course, was Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which I recall having an incredible, unfathomable amount of hype behind it. Then the movie came out, and while a lot of people were disappointed, the movie made almost $1 billion in the box office. The second best movie that year, surprisingly, was The Sixth Sense, a psychological thriller starring Bruce Willis, who at that point was that big action star who apparently could sell any movie as long as he was in it. Just the previous year, he had box office success with Armageddon. Then at number 3 came Toy Story 2, but none of those top 3 movies come close to being the actual top 3 movies of that year, in my opinion. You had The Matrix come out in 1999, as well as Fight Club, American Pie, Life, the Austin Powers movie. One interesting thing about all these movies, like all the ones that I mentioned, they all ended up doing exceptionally well with DVD sales and airing on network TV. I never saw Tarzan in theaters, but I sure as hell remember seeing it on DVD about 55 times. 99 was an era-defining year for music. It became clear that the Woodstock Music Festival was of the past and couldn't come back. They brought back Woodstock for a third and final time in New York during the summer. And while it had some cool bands show up like Red Hot Chili Peppers and Rage Against the Machine, the concert had a lot of issues. There were several deaths. 40-something people got arrested for all kinds of crazy and heinous things. People got hurt, money lost, and there was numerous lawsuits. The San Francisco Examiner on the other side of the country would describe it as the day music died. Well, music was alive and well. It was just changing. In June of '99 was the creation of Napster, the OG file sharing site for music. that, once taken down in 2001 for copyright infringement, would inspire a whole new wave of internet piracy, or friendly file sharing. And while MP3s and CD ripping was starting to become a thing, CD sales was still doing very well in 1999. Lauryn Hill makes history at the Grammy Awards by being the first female artist to win 5 Grammys in one night, as a follow-up to her iconic 1998 album. On another 1998 album follow-up, the Cher song, Believe, reaches #1 on the Billboard, making Cher the oldest female artist at 52 to achieve this. Britney Spears comes out with her debut album, hitting #1 on the Billboard charts with the album and single Baby One More Time. She also goes on her first concert tour in the same year. Also, the Backstreet Boys released their 3rd album, Millennium, worldwide, also doing extremely well, selling over 1 million copies its first week. The RIAA introduces a new level of music achievement, Diamond. Guitarist Santana and vocalist Rob Thomas released the single, Smooth, where it peaks at #1 for 3 months. Christina Aguilera also releases her debut album, by the way. It was a big year for new pop music, and while newer, younger artists were coming up, the older ones who've been active since the 70s, like David Bowie, were still performing and making music. David Bowie released his 21st studio album called Hours. It has that late 90s pop vibe to it, and it's known as the first full-length album by a major artist to be legally available to download over the internet. A true artist is always willing to be versatile and to try something new. And Bowie really exemplified that through his career. I swear to God, Space Oddity might be my favorite song of all time. While 1999 was big for pop music, he also had hip-hop and R&B getting closer to the mainstream. Eminem was gaining success in rap with the Slim Shady LP, which went platinum, surely with the help of his known association with Dr. Dre, who made a comeback in '99 with 2001, or The Chronic 2, producing 3 singles that went 6 times platinum. Destiny's Child released their 2nd studio album, and TLC released their 3rd, both including iconic singles that till this day still bangs. 1999 was still prime MTV time, and everyone with a hit single had a video to go with it. And all the upbeat songs had that late 90s vibe. Not quite the Y2K look, but it was like, boom, we're moving into the future. Let's go. The year wasn't good for all genres of music though. Because of the Columbine massacre, anything in the media depicting violence was being blamed for what happened, especially rock and metal music, with Marilyn Manson being the brunt of the blame despite evidence that neither of the Columbine shooters were fans of his. The year would end with New Year's Eve celebrations for the big move into the year 2000, and one of my all-time favorite music artists, Billy Joel, would play a concert at Madison Square Garden that night. And this, in a nutshell, was the year MCM XCIX, 1999, the final year of the 20th century and the end of an era. Notably, a fantastic year for animation. A part 2 to the amazing year of 1998. A prequel to Y2K. And while it wasn't perfect from a child's perspective, it felt like it was. Hope you enjoyed 1999, because you'll probably never see another year with that many 9s ever again. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, like and subscribe to Retro Sick for more random nostalgia and interesting coincidences surrounding said nostalgia. And I will see ya next time.